They say that the human heart can only hold so much. So much hope, so much determination, so much fear. I spent 10 years testing that limit. 10 years carving every spare dollar, every spare hour, every dream I had for the future, and sinking it all into one single, impossible goal, a front door with my own key. I didn't steal it. I didn't inherit it. I bled for it. I sacrificed relationships, sleep, my youth, my health, everything, just to stand on my own piece of earth. And when I finally held that key in my hand, I thought I had won. I thought I had broken the cycle. I was wrong. Because the moment I finally put down roots, the ground beneath me started to shake. And what happened next wasn't a sudden disaster. It was a slow, agonizing process. The world, the economy, the system, they didn't care about my 10 years of sacrifice. They only cared about the fine print. This isn't just the story of a house. This is the story of how much a human being can endure, how much you can lose, and what happens when you pour your entire life into one single dream, only to watch the bank quietly, coldly, take it all back. It's funny, isn't it? The way certain sounds just bring everything back. That train whistle, for instance. It's the same one that used to run about 2 miles from the house.
Not my house now, but the one I used to own.
The one I spent 10 years of my life earning. I sit here tonight, and it's quiet. Too quiet, maybe. The kind of silence that used to be a luxury, but now it just feels like an absence. And sometimes when the silence gets too loud, I start to think about the numbers. Not the dollars, not the interest rates, but the numbers that actually matter.
10. 10 years I saved.
$48,000, exactly. 123 extra shifts. 2,851 nights of dreaming about a single, simple thing. A front door with my own key. I guess the story has to start where all big stories start. Small. I grew up in a place where the walls were thin. Literally. A 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The smell of Tide and hot steam was the perfume of my childhood. My mom was a nurse. My dad worked construction. They were good people, hardworking people. But every month was a high-wire act. We never went hungry, but the word emergency was always hanging in the air, a shadow ready to fall. I saw the stress etched into their faces, the quiet arguments over bills laid out on the kitchen table like casualties of war. They rented for 40 years. 40 years of putting their hard-earned money into someone else's pocket. They had this beautiful, heartbreaking dream of owning a place, a tiny little postage stamp of land they could call their own. They never got there. I remember when I was about 16, lying in my small, dark room, the sound of the washing machines rumbling below. I made a silent promise to myself, a vow whispered into the cheap drywall. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't spend my whole life renting. I decided then that the one thing I was going to achieve, the single greatest milestone of my adult life, would be a house. Not a mansion. Just a house. A solid, quiet place where the only sounds were the ones I chose to make. The year I turned 25, the clock started. It wasn't a dramatic moment, no sudden epiphany.
It was a Tuesday.
I was working a pretty standard office job, entry-level, pushing papers. The pay was decent, enough to live in a shared apartment with 2 other guys, enough for cheap ramen and a couple of beers on Friday. But that Tuesday, I opened my bank statement and looked at the pitiful balance. I was 25, and I had $200 to my name.
It was terrifying.
That night, I opened a new spreadsheet. The first column was goal, down payment. The number I plugged in felt astronomical, $30,000. I didn't know how long it would take. Maybe 5 years, maybe 20. But that night, I started the process of turning my life into a single, focused machine. I started saying no. That was the first lesson. No to the weekend trip to the coast. No to the new laptop. No to the nice dinner. It was a tiny little word, no, but it had a massive echo. My friends didn't get it. They'd tease me. Come on, man, live a little. You only turn 26 once. I'd force a smile and say, nah, can't swing it this month. I never told them the truth. The truth was, every dollar spent on a frivolous night out felt like a tiny cut, a bleed that was slowing my escape. I picked up a second job, stocking shelves at a grocery store 3 nights a week, from 11 p.m. until 3 a.m. The store was cold, fluorescent lit, and smelled of stale cardboard and overripe fruit. I was exhausted all the time. I'd go to my office job, put in 8 hours, grab a quick, sad dinner from a tin, and then head straight to the grocery store. I'd spend those 4 hours moving boxes, organizing cans, my mind in a dull, steady trance. I remember one night, standing in the soup aisle holding a box of chicken noodle. It was 1:30 a.m. My back ached. My eyes were burning. I just stopped and stood there, staring at the label. I felt a wave of complete despair wash over me. Is this my life? Am I going to be 30, 35, 40 still doing this? The thought was a physical punch. But then, I forced myself to think of the spreadsheet. I had saved $700 that month. $700 closer to the front door. And the thought gave me just enough strength to lift the next box. Years 2 through 4 were the grind. The real, slow, patient grind that strips away everything unnecessary. My social life shriveled up. I started dating a wonderful woman named Clara in year 3. She was an artist, free-spirited, beautiful, and completely bewildered by my monastic life. We could take a weekend, just one, she'd plead. We could drive an hour, find a cabin, see the stars. Just once, Daniel. I'd hold her tight in the cramped living room of my shared apartment. I know, sweetheart, but that cabin rental is $1,000. That's 2 months of savings. I'm so close. She'd sigh, not an angry sigh, but a sad one. You're always so close, Dan. The house is a beautiful dream, but you're living in a cage to get it. She was right. I was living in a cage. But I saw that cage as temporary, a launch pad. I had a picture on my bedroom wall. It was a faded photo I'd found online of a small, 2-story bungalow with a porch. It was just a generic image, but to me, it was the finish line. Every morning, I'd look at that porch and tell myself, one more day. Clara and I broke up in year 5. It was mutual, but heartbreaking. She needed a life, a partner who could live in the present, spontaneously. I needed a partner who understood that my present was just a means to an end. The last night we spent together, she packed her things, standing in the hallway, illuminated by the harsh overhead light. I can't wait for you anymore, Dan, she said, her voice raw. I love you, but I can't be a passenger on a 10-year train ride to a place I might not even want to live. When she closed the door, the silence was immense. The 5 years I had saved felt heavy, a burden instead of a victory. I sat on my bed, staring at the picture of the bungalow, and I cried for the first and only time during that whole period. I cried for Clara, and I cried because I knew that every true sacrifice, every big dream, comes with a cost. And sometimes that cost is the people you love. But I didn't stop. Giving up then would have meant that her loss, her leaving, was for nothing. Years 5 through 8 brought small victories and major setbacks. In year 6, I got a promotion. A real one. I went from the paper pusher to a junior analyst. My salary jumped, and suddenly my savings rate doubled. I quit the night job. That moment, walking out of the grocery store for the last time at 3 a.m., was one of the purest, most uncomplicated joys I've ever felt. The air outside felt fresh, clean. I was done with the cold warehouse. The setback hit in year 8. My mom got sick. Nothing life-threatening, but she needed surgery and a few months of intense therapy. My parents' insurance was terrible, the deductibles astronomical. My dad, who had always been the rock, looked shattered. We'll lose the apartment, Danny, he whispered one night on the phone. We can't cover this. I didn't hesitate. I pulled $10,000 out of my savings. 10 years of sacrifice, gone in a single transfer. It felt like a physical tearing. But seeing the relief flood my dad's face, the way my mom was able to rest and recover without the crushing weight of debt, it was worth it. Every penny. I was a few years older now, and I understood that a true foundation isn't just made of money. It's made of family. The downside was that I was back to square one emotionally. The $40,000 goal was still out there, but I had lost 2 full years of progress. I was 33 now. The idea of saving for another 4 or 5 years felt impossible, but the habit was ingrained. It was my default setting. The fire that had gone out was rekindled by the sound of my mom's healthy laughter a few months later. I redoubled my efforts. I stopped eating out entirely, started packing lunch every day, a sandwich, an apple, a bottle of water. I became hyper-efficient, meticulous, almost obsessed. In year 10, it happened. I was sitting at my desk, looking at the spreadsheet. The final number. The $35,000 for the down payment, the $5,000 for closing costs, the $2,000 for a reserve buffer. $42,000. The bank account matched the spreadsheet. It was 11:34 a.m. on a Thursday morning. I didn't shout. I didn't call anyone. I just leaned back in my chair and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding since I was 16. 10 years. I closed the office door, took out my phone, and called my parents.
Mom. Dad.
I did it. I'm buying a house. My mom didn't say anything for a moment. Just a quiet, hiccuping sob. Your father and I are so proud of you, Danny. So proud. That was the real victory. The search was quick. I wasn't looking for a dream home. I was looking for a starter home. A small, sturdy ranch house, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, in a decent, working-class suburb about an hour outside the city. It had good bones, a tiny patch of grass in the front, and a back deck that needed painting. It was quiet. So quiet. The day of the closing, the realtor handed me the key. It was a single, plain brass key, but it felt heavy, like a historical artifact, like the weight of my entire adult life. I walked out of the title office into the bright afternoon sun and stood on the sidewalk. I felt a surge of pride, a feeling so pure it was almost religious. I had done it, against all odds, against every temptation, against the voice that told me to quit. I had bought my freedom. The first night in the house was silent and strange. I had no furniture, just a sleeping bag and a pillow on the floor of the living room. I remember the smell, a mix of old dust, fresh paint, and the faint, sweet scent of the previous owner's garden. I lay there in the dark, and I listened. No loud neighbors. No humming washing machines. Just the quiet sound of the wind moving through the single oak tree in the front yard. And then the distant train whistle. The real one. I felt a kind of peace that I hadn't known existed. It wasn't just a house. It was a monument to persistence. The next 2 years were the best years of my life. I started to live a little, like Clara had wanted. I got a comfortable sofa, painted the walls a quiet, relaxing blue, and started a tiny vegetable garden out back. I had a girlfriend too, Sarah. She loved the little house. We'd sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the fireflies, and I'd finally understand what people meant by settling down. I was anchored. My world was stable. My mortgage payments were high, but manageable. I was still saving, just at a slower, healthier pace. I even got my parents to come over. My mom walked into the small kitchen and just touched the countertop, smiling. "It's yours, Danny," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "You did it." My dad wandered the backyard, inspecting the oak tree and the small shed. He didn't say much, but when I caught his eye, he gave me a slow, proud nod. It was everything. But the world, as it tends to do, shifts. Slowly, then all at once. It started with my job. Year 12 of my career. The company had been stable for 50 years. Then, in the span of 6 months, a new CEO, a merger, and a complete restructuring. The buzz started small, quiet conversations in the break room. Layoffs. Massive ones. I felt the familiar twist of anxiety in my stomach. I was good at my job, efficient, dedicated. But good isn't always enough in a corporate bloodbath. The call came on a chilly October morning. My boss, a decent man who looked genuinely miserable, sat me down in an empty conference room. "Daniel, I'm sorry. It's nothing you did. Your position has been eliminated." The words hung in the air. Eliminated. Not failed. Just erased. I signed the severance papers, collected my box of personal belongings, and drove home. Sarah was waiting for me. She tried to be comforting, saying it was a blessing in disguise, a chance for a new beginning. But I felt the cold dread seeping into me. I had a severance package, 3 months' pay. Enough to cover 3 mortgage payments, utilities, and a little breathing room. But that room was small, and the clock was ticking. I applied for jobs, relentlessly. I spent 8 hours a day in the little dining room, which I'd turned into a home office. I customized my resume, wrote cover letters, went to interviews. The market was tight. Every job application had 500 applicants. I was overqualified for the lower-paying jobs and underqualified for the senior roles. The rejection emails piled up in my inbox, a digital tombstone for my confidence. 3 months passed. The severance ran out. The first missed payment was the most terrifying moment of my adult life. It wasn't just a late bill. It was a failure of the sacred vow I had made to myself. I called the bank before the due date, my voice trembling. "I need an extension," I pleaded with the representative. "I'm actively looking for work. I have interviews lined up. Just give me 30 days. The woman on the other end, polite but completely impersonal, sounded like a pre-recorded message. "Sir, you have a conventional loan. We do not offer grace periods for late payments. You must submit a hardship application." The hardship application was a 20-page monstrosity, requiring documentation I didn't have, income projections I couldn't guarantee, and a level of bureaucratic patience I had run out of. I filled it out, every word a hollow echo of my hope. Meanwhile, the phone calls started. Not the nice kind. The ones that start polite and then gradually ratchet up the pressure. They started with letters, formal, impersonal, stamped with red ink. Then the calls. Every day. Multiple times a day. "Mr. Holloway, this is a courtesy call regarding your delinquent payment." It felt like I was being hunted. I started to dread the phone ringing. I'd let it go to voicemail, listening to the stern, emotionless voice on the other end, feeling the shame burn in my cheeks. I was Daniel Holloway, the man who saved for 10 years, the man who won the game. And now I couldn't pay his mortgage. Sarah and I started fighting. The stress was a physical weight in the house. "Why don't you just take that part-time job?" she'd ask. "It's better than nothing. We could cover half the payment." Because if I take a minimum wage job, Sarah, I'll be busy there instead of looking for a career. I'll be stuck. I can't start over again. I was protecting the dream, but I was sacrificing the present. I was stubborn, terrified of settling for anything less than what I felt I deserved after years of sacrifice. I see now that was my greatest mistake. Pride is a slow killer. I missed the second payment. And then the third. The bank's tone changed. The letters became legal documents. The calls became threats. The phrase, "notice of intent to foreclose," was stamped across a heavy envelope that landed on my porch one cold morning. I was physically sick. My 10-year foundation was crumbling beneath me. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake in the dark, the quiet house now feeling like a trap. I'd replay the last 10 years in my head, searching for the moment I went wrong. Should I have kept the night job? Should I have invested differently? Should I have taken that trip with Clara? Was the house itself the mistake? I finally got a job offer, a decent one, a lateral move, but with good pay. But it was too late. I was 4 payments behind. Even with the new salary, I couldn't cover the entire arrearage. The 4 missed payments, the late fees, the mounting legal costs the bank had piled on. I was drowning. I called the bank, practically begging. "I have a new job. I can make the payment today and the full payment next month. Please, let's set up a plan." The lawyer on the other end of the line was clipped and efficient. "Mr. Holloway, the foreclosure process has been initiated. We received your hardship application, but it was incomplete and rejected. You must submit the full amount, plus all accrued fees, to stop the proceedings. The bank's position is that you have demonstrated an inability to service the debt." Inability to service the debt. That phrase. It dehumanized the whole struggle. It erased the 10 years of effort, the sleepless nights, the family sacrifice. It reduced my life to a line item on their balance sheet. I tried everything. I contacted nonprofit housing counselors. I spoke to a real estate attorney who looked at my paperwork, shook his head sadly, and told me, "You're in a tough position, Daniel. They have you by the fine print. The bank owned the property now. My deed, my single brass key, the monument to my endurance, was now worthless. I was a tenant in my own home, waiting for the eviction notice. Sarah left a week before the final date. We were both just shells of the people we had been. The love hadn't died, but it was suffocated by the financial devastation. I can't do this, Dan," she whispered, packing a duffel bag, her eyes red-rimmed. "I can't watch this happen to you. It's too much." I didn't argue. I just sat on the steps of the porch I had painted blue, and watched her car pull away. The silence of the house was absolute. The day the sheriff came was unremarkable. A Tuesday, raining, a soft, steady drizzle. He was a kind man, though his eyes were tired. He handed me the final papers. The order of ejection. "You have 2 hours, son," he said gently. "Just take what you can. Leave the rest." I walked through the house, my house, one last time. The blue walls I had painted, the comfortable sofa, the small, neat kitchen. I had bought everything with cash, saved up, earned it. I had to leave it all behind. I went into the living room and packed one box. Just one. My diploma, a few old photos, a faded, wrinkled photo of a small bungalow I had cut out of a magazine 10 years ago, and the single, brass key. I packed the key. I stood in the doorway, the scent of fresh rain in the air. I looked at the oak tree, then at the porch, then at the front door. And I closed it behind me. I didn't lock it. I didn't have to. The house was already gone. I didn't cry then. I didn't feel anger, or grief, or even shame. I felt empty. An absolute, terrifying void. I drove away, my car full of nothing but the one box, and I didn't look back. The shame didn't hit until a few weeks later. I was renting a room from an elderly woman a few towns over. It was a tiny room, dusty, smelling faintly of potpourri and old age. I was back where I started, sleeping in a room that wasn't mine, with a shared wall and a distant, muffled sound of a television. I'd see my friends, my old colleagues, and I'd lie. The housing market was too good to resist. I sold, and I'm investing for now. The life felt heavy and brittle on my tongue. The shame was the worst kind, the kind that tells you that you are fundamentally flawed, that all your effort was a waste, and that you are incapable of building a secure life. But you can't stay empty forever. You have to fill the space with something. And slowly, painfully, I started to fill it with perspective. It took a year, a whole year of therapy, of long, quiet walks, and a lot of late-night reflection. And I came to understand a few things. First, the system is indifferent. The bank, the mortgage, the foreclosure process, it wasn't personal. It was just a machine designed to protect its own capital, not your dream. The machine doesn't care about your 10 years of sacrifice. It cares about the paperwork. And when you stumble, it rolls right over you. Second, the true foundation isn't brick and mortar. The house was the goal, the fixation. But the real victory was the person I became in the process of getting it. I became tenacious. I learned discipline. I learned the immense, humbling power of long-term commitment. That man, the man who saved for 10 years, is still inside me. That is what cannot be repossessed. And finally, the heartbreak. The loss was real. It was the death of a beautiful life I had built. But every tragedy carries a lesson, a scar that teaches you endurance. I learned that you have to be vigilant, not just with money, but with the world. You have to build a buffer for the buffer. You have to save for the inevitable moment when the whole world decides to turn against you. 2 years have passed since the bank took the house. I have a new job, a stable job. I'm renting a small apartment now, my own apartment. The walls are solid. The kitchen is clean. I'm starting to save again. Not with the frantic, monastic zeal of my 20s, but with a quiet, steady determination. I've learned that a dream deferred is not a dream denied. It's just a dream waiting for a stronger foundation. The rain outside has settled into a steady, soft rhythm. The train whistle is heard one last time, much fainter. The sound of the rain is actually beautiful tonight. It's quiet. It's a peace I earn not by owning a house, but by surviving the loss of one. I am still here. I am still standing. And I know, with a certainty that settles deep in my bones, that I am tougher, wiser, and more human than I was when I first closed that door. The house is gone. The lesson remains. And that, in the end, is a kind of victory.